mentioned earlier today about how you've been playing like pickup and stuff. I guess I'm just curious, like who are you playing like pickup games with?
A lot of former college players, some pro players that are back in.
The basketball community is constantly discussing something that occurred in Puerto Rico, and it goes far beyond a game's outcome. 8 months. Caitlin Clark hadn't played in a competitive basketball game for that long. A whole country of supporters held their breath, waiting to see if she would ever fully return to the player who shattered every record in the book during 8 months of rehabilitation, setbacks, and quiet frustration. At the FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying tournament in San Juan, Puerto Rico, she not only returned to the floor for Team USA, but she also assumed leadership roles. The problem is that no one is speaking loud enough. During one of those games, the coach's remarks on live television caused a complete frenzy on the internet. There were altercations, disputes, and fan outbursts. And a coaching staff being publicly humiliated in ways that would make most adult males shudder. This entire issue is far more complex than it first appears, and once you realize what was actually happening, everything begins to make sense while simultaneously being much messier. You must go back to the beginning of this tournament and comprehend exactly what was at stake before a single ball was tipped off in order to comprehend how we got here. A groin strain, one of several lower body problems, terminated Clark's already terrible sophomore WNBA season on July 15th of last year. Throughout the year, she only participated in 13 games. 13. She averaged 16, for comparison. She showed glimmers of the player she can be in those appearances, scoring 5 points a game, but the injuries simply kept piling up. When she was added to USA Basketball's FIBA World Cup qualifying squad in February 2026, the entire sports world seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Fans were famished, and the media was on high alert. At last, she was returning, but the query began nearly instantly. Who was leading this crew, and were they truly aware of the situation they were in? The person at the top of the organizational ladder was head coach Kara Lawson, but even before the first whistle blew, this situation was out of the ordinary. Lawson's NCAA coaching duties coincided with the FIBA tournament schedule. Lawson is also the coach of the Duke women's basketball team. As a result, the official captain of the most talented women's national team in recent memory would only be physically present for 2 of the 5 qualifying matches. It's not a footnote. On its own, that plot is enormous. For the final 3 games, including the Spain final, Lawson's assistant, Phoenix Mercury head coach Nate Tibbetts, will serve as acting head coach. Fans were already watching, wary, and prepared to point out anything that seemed strange about the way Clark was being exploited. To be honest, the coaching staff gave them lots of ammunition practically right away. In the first game, which was against Senegal, Clark made her comeback as loudly as she could. Clark scored 17 points and dished out 12 assists in only 19 minutes after coming off the bench, a move that sparked immediate conversation. She had the second highest assist total in a FIBA Women's World Cup qualification game in history, shot 80% from the field, and was flawless from the free throw line. Give that some thought. She came off the bench in a limited role, hadn't played in 239 days, was reportedly still recovering from an injury, and was already making history. The highlight reels, social media videos, and audience reactions all went viral. However, individuals almost instantly shifted to a more awkward inquiry rather than joyfully celebrating. Why didn't she begin? Following Senegal's victory, Lawson spoke on the rotation, stating that she intended to test different lineup combinations during the competition. Adequate response on paper. Fans, however, didn't buy it. Every platform was inundated with comments. USA Basketball is absurd. One post said, "You're purposefully excluding your best player as a starter." Some were more direct, labeling the choice as outright crazy. With 25 points and 14 assists in the first 2 games against Senegal and Puerto Rico, Clark led the team in several categories and was statistically the best player on that team. No beginning nod yet. The coaches became the target of the growing frustration. Comments such as, "I no longer believe Kara Lawson to be a great coach. Thousands of people are liking us." The story was changing quickly until something occurred on video that completely changed the course of events. In their 4th match and the first that Tibbett had complete control of, Team USA's performance versus New Zealand was lackluster. In the first quarter, they appeared lifeless, lacked enthusiasm, and, to be honest, humiliated themselves. Tibbetts had had enough. The next event was captured on the broadcast mics and quickly gained widespread attention. Tibbetts called the players together for a huddle and gave an unpolished pep talk. He criticized the team's body language using unvarnished, unfiltered language that you wouldn't typically hear on a national broadcast, words that had to be bleeped out in replays, and the line, "that saw matters," became the one that people repeatedly shared and cut. The response was completely divided. It was unplanned, and it was fiery. It was adored by half of the basketball community. This coach wasn't holding back, wasn't using corporate coach speak, and wasn't diluting his message. He told his players the truth while staring them in the eye, and it worked. After exploding in the second quarter and leading 54-18 at the half, Team USA never looked back and destroyed New Zealand 101-46. After the game, veteran guard Ryan Howard, who scored 18 points, praised Tibbetts without holding back. She described how he overcomes hardship and how the players are well aware of his desires. However, what about the other half of the response? They didn't find it impressive. The appropriateness of that profanity on a worldwide broadcast was questioned by several viewers. Others thought it was demeaning, especially considering the quality of the players in that huddle, women who had earned their spot in the sport and won titles and gold medals at the Olympics. The argument raged for days, but this is when the Spain game enters the picture and the whole discussion takes a drastic turn. On March 17th, Team USA played Spain in the FIBA qualification tournament's final match. Additionally, this matchup was genuinely competitive, in contrast to all the others that week. Spain made a surge. They were physically strong, well-behaved, and obviously prepared. In Lawson's absence, Tibbetts led the sideline once more and drastically reduced the rotation to just 8 players before garbage time. Millions of people kept a careful eye on Caitlin Clark's performance in that stressful scenario, with the game on the line and the coaching staff under scrutiny. She finished with 7 points and 7 assists in just over 22 minutes of action. She was only 2 for 7 from the field and 1 for 5 from 3, not as good as in prior games. Her playmaking and vision, however, remained distinct. With an 84-70 victory, Team USA concluded the competition with a flawless 5-0 record. However, the internet had already begun dissecting every choice made on that sideline before the final buzzer could even cause celebration. The primary critique? That Clark's minutes were handled in a way that infuriated supporters, and that the Spain match was the hardest test of the tournament and the one that counted most for determining who should go the World Cup in Berlin. They cited her prior performance against Italy, in which she entered the game at 6:46 in the first quarter and went on to dramatically change the offense. In just 6.5 minutes, Team USA scored 23 points with Clark at the point. They would score 5 points in 3 minutes before she checked in. The floor's entire geometry changed as soon as she walked in. In quick time, the Italian defense changed from being at ease to being powerless. The movie had been seen by fans. They recalled. They anticipated seeing that same unbridled version in action against Spain. Instead, they had a tight rotation and controlled minutes. The fourth quarter versus Italy, when Tibbetts eventually put Clark and Paige Bookers on the floor together, was one instance that kept coming up in post-game conversations. Observers described what transpired as an offensive clinic. When two outstanding playmakers who can shoot from 30 feet, create off the dribble, and pass with exceptional vision share the same backcourt, their combined efficacy multiplies to such an extent that the defensive math becomes impossible. It wasn't quite as noticeable, and the coaching staff heard about it from all sides if spectators wanted to see it repeated in the Spain match. Social media was ruthless. One comment on this coach and her absurd rotations received thousands of replies. Some described it as an almost incompetent squandering of resources. Even those who had first supported the staff strategy began to change their minds. The time and the stakes were what set the Spain backlash apart from previous tournament grievances. Fans were irritated when Lawson initially decided not to start Clark earlier in the week, but they were also open to the possibility that she was handling a player recovering from an injury. That grace period quickly passed. Dark Clark had already shown in 4 games that she was not a liability by the time of the Spain match. When given a true runway, she was that roster's most exciting weapon. There was no need to add any spin because the tournament statistics already told the story. Despite coming off the bench in restricted minutes following an 8-month hiatus, Clark tied for the team lead in scoring, led all players in the qualifying field in plus-minus at +80, and led Team USA in total assists. These figures are not accidental. Even after she was chosen MVP of the entire tournament, the controversy around her role, her minutes, and her fit with the coaching staff's vision persisted despite the fact that those figures occur when someone is performing at a level above the competition. Caitlin Clark was declared the most valuable player of the FIBA Women's World Cup qualifying tournament in San Juan on the evening of March 18th. She received 11 in the end. 6 points on 52 per game. 9% shooting, a tournament-high 6. 2 triples, 4 assists, and 1 per game. 6 rebounds in 5 games. She truly deserved the distinction, and the response was overwhelming. However, disagreement persisted even after the MVP announcement. Although FIBA hadn't exactly gone out of its way to make the tournament easy to watch, fans pointed out that Clark deserved the honor. TNT only finalized a deal with FIBA on March 5th, 6 days before the tournament started, thus the entire broadcast scenario had been tumultuous from the beginning. There was a noticeable decline in production quality, empty-looking stadia, and subpar camera work. Although the infrastructure wasn't up to date, Clark herself stated how crucial it was for younger fans to be able to play the game. The entire week seemed like a setup that fell short of the caliber of the players on the floor. And then there was the tension that some fans thought had been brewing all week. The complex relationship between Clark and Stephanie White, the head coach of the Indiana Fever and one of Team USA's court coaches during the qualification round. Fans who had been following the Fever's 2025 campaign were already offended by White's treatment of Clark. Photographs from the pre-tournament camp showed Clark standing next to White with a face that some characterized as markedly aloof, and social media soon took note. One admirer commented that ManCC always appears depressed or unhappy when she is around Stephanie White. Another remarked that Sue Bird ought to intervene to ensure that the two were getting along. Some even went so far as to remark that there looked to be a fundamental problem with the dynamic. Only those in the locker room know for sure whether there was actual animosity or if fans were just reading too much into candid images during what was already an emotionally charged comeback week. Nevertheless, the rumors became viral. More than anything else, the entire FIBA qualification week revealed how much attention Caitlin Clark has received, and how every choice made anywhere close to her is scrutinized with a degree of intensity that most athletes never encounter throughout their careers. It was impossible for the coaching staff to switch up the players without starting a national controversy. It would be impossible for the show to be poorly produced without turning into a vote on how the media handles women's basketball. A coach couldn't give an impassioned halftime address without it going viral and dividing people's opinions for days. It was impossible for a coworker to make a humorous comment on an Instagram photo without it being analyzed for deeper significance. On Clark's post-tournament carousel of pictures, her Team USA teammate Sophie Cunningham remarked that despite being in public relations, she was still pale. It was obviously a joke that made reference to the MVP award. However, anything within 3 degrees of Caitlin Clark is suddenly content, so even that benign transaction became content. What this competition showed about Team USA's true potential at the World Cup in Berlin in September is what really counts going forward. This roster's talent is truly unparalleled. Chelsea Gray, Jackie Young, Ryan Howard, Angel Reese, Clark, Buckers, and Collier Copper. Clicking on this group makes it totally unguardable. They were put to the test by Spain, the most formidable opponent in San Juan, and were defeated 84-70. The rest of the world is moving forward. In international women's basketball, Australia boasts one of the most disciplined rosters. Belgium and France are creating intelligent, strong teams. Long-term threats have always come from China. Team USA might be in serious trouble against anyone with discipline and a strategy if they enter Berlin playing cautious basketball with controlled rotations and veteran starting units. However, no one in the world can stop them if they play like they did during those moments when Bookers and Clark were unleashed together. Despite the controversy surrounding his sideline remarks, Nate Tibbetts did prove something significant in Puerto Rico. When the pressure mounts, he adjusts, keeps players accountable without worrying about the cameras, and produces results.